Mm. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the virtual public information meeting for Project 53-199, which involves the rehabilitation of bridge number 417, also known as the Putnam Bridge, in the towns of Wethersfield and Glastonbury. My name is Tracy Bray, and I am the project manager from the Connecticut DOT Major Structures Unit. Next slide, please, Ron. Thank you. Uh, this slide has all of my contact information. If you have any questions or comments anytime after this meeting, you can either use the project email address and phone number, or you can contact me directly. There's my telephone number and email address there. Next slide, please. For those of us joining tonight who would like to use closed captioning or non-English translation options, please look to your toolbar at the bottom of the Zoom screen and select the Show Captions icon, which is shown in circle number 1 on this slide. Then click Speaking Language, and then select the language you would like from the list. Next slide. So the agenda for tonight's meeting includes an overview of how to submit your questions and comments. And we'll go through some of the other information. And then I'll provide an introduction to the project team. Then we'll go through the technical portion of the project, which will describe the existing bridge conditions, purpose and need of the project, proposed rehabilitation tasks, and benefits and environmental right-of-way, other impacts associated with the project. Lastly, we'll have a live Q&A session during which we'll provide responses to your comments and questions. Next slide, please. So there are 3 ways you can use to communicate with us during the live question and answer session. So 1, you can submit questions and comments via email at the project email address. So capital D, capital O, capital T, capital P, ROJECT 0053-0199 at ct.gov. You can also call at the phone number 860-594-2020 and leave a voicemail. When leaving a voicemail, please reference project number 53-199. And lastly, if you've joined us through Zoom, you can type your questions or comments into the Q&A box. This function is only available during tonight's meeting. You can enter your questions and comments, though, at any time during the meeting. And at the end of the presentation, the project team will read the questions and provide responses. We'll walk through how to use this function in the next slide. After the meeting, comments and questions can still be submitted via email or phone using the email address and phone number above. The comment period is open through April 18th. Next slide, please. So on this slide, it kind of describes how to use the Q&A function. So again, at the bottom of your window on that Zoom toolbar, there is a button for Q&A as shown in the green box on this slide with number 1 marked on it. You can click on that and that should open the Q&A box. Then there is an area marked in the green box, number 3 on this slide, where you can type in your question and just hit enter. And it'll come up and everyone should be able to view all the questions that are submitted. If you are an audio-only participant, please dial *9 to raise and lower your hand, and we can turn on your mic and you can ask your question. Next slide, please. As part of Title VI, your civil rights, no person shall, on the basis of race, color, or national origin be excluded from participation or subject to discrimination in the development of this project. A link to the DOT's Office of Equity page, which has more information regarding your civil rights, is provided on this slide. We also have a QR code and a link on this slide to a voluntary survey where you can rate the timing, information provided, and accessibility of tonight's meeting. Your feedback is greatly appreciated as it will help us improve our approach for future meetings. Next slide, please. So again, this provides a little more information. The Connecticut Department of Transportation operates its programs and services without regard to race, color, and national origin in accordance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Any person who believes she or he has been aggrieved by any unlawful discriminatory practice under Title VI may file a complaint with the Connecticut DOT. And the slide has more information on how to file a complaint, either with CTDOT, the Federal Transit Administration, or Federal Highway Administration. Next slide, please. So I'm going to pause for a moment so that those who would like to read this slide, which is the same information in Spanish, may do so. Next slide, please. For project 53-199, the project team consists of folks from Connecticut DOT and the consultant engineering firm GM2. From the department, we have Bart Sweeney, the division chief of bridges, Bao Chung, the principal engineer, myself, Tracy Bray, project manager, and Jessica Carvajal, our project engineer. And then from GM2, we have Ron Sacchi, project manager, and Mike Delikas, the project engineer. Also in attendance tonight are Derek Greger, the Wethersfield town engineer. I saw Jonathan Louise from the Glastonbury town manager is logged into this call. And we also have Dan Pennington, the Glastonbury town engineer. Next slide, please. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ron Sacchi from GM2 to go through the technical portion of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. So the Putnam Memorial Bridge, the two location maps here, one's a little farther out, one's a little closer up. The Putnam Memorial Bridge essentially carries Route 3 over the Connecticut River, and it connects Interstate 91 and Route 2 between each other. There are 2 lanes northbound and 2 lanes southbound. And it's a limited access highway through this stretch. And as you can see, Interstate 91 here, along this stretch right here, interchange 25 is the interchange that provides access to Route 3. And this is interchange 6 on Route 2 right here. A little closer view here shows the close-up view of the interchange 2591 and the Putnam Memorial Bridge with the Connecticut River and also Teeny Cove. So this is kind of an aerial view of it. And, as you can see, the town line between Glastonbury and Wethersfield pretty much runs right down the middle of the river. There is a navigation channel under span 7, which is on the Wethersfield side of the center of the river under the bridge. You could just barely see interchange 25 and 91 in the lower left-hand corner. The average daily traffic across this bridge going northbound, which is basically Wethersfield to Glastonbury, is about 28,100 vehicles per day, and traveling southbound, which would be traveling from Glastonbury into Wethersfield, is about 27,000 vehicles per day. There's a multi-purpose trail that has been under construction that will connect Glastonbury to Wethersfield, and a portion of that trail will travel over the southern fascia of this bridge. And we'll get to more of that in a moment. So just before we get into stuff, let me explain some basic terminology that we'll use here. Basically, a bridge can be broken into two broad groups. One is the substructure and one is the superstructure. The substructure is essentially any bridge element that's kind of founded on the ground or on into the earth. For example, the abutment is basically a big wall withholding some earth where the steel beams rest on. The wing wall is a wall on the side, again, retaining the earth embankment for the highway. There are piers that provide intermediate supports for the steel beams. And then the superstructure, it really contains your steel beams, it contains your concrete deck and the parapets, which are really the sides of the bridge that kind of contain the vehicles on the bridge. There's also a bridge condition rating scale between 1 and 9. Every 2 years, all the bridges in the state of Connecticut get rated, and all the various bridge elements also receive a rating. And so for the Putnam Bridge, the overall structure condition was given a 5. It's in fair condition. The steel girders are rated as a 5, and the concrete deck is also rated as a 5, fair. The substructure is rated as a 6 in satisfactory condition. And as you can see here, we have a typical cross-section of this bridge. This bridge is what's considered a two main girder bridge with floor beams and stringers supporting a concrete deck. And as you can see, we have 2 lanes traveling northbound, 2 lanes traveling southbound. It was constructed about 65 years ago in 1959. The total length of the bridge is 2,393 feet, almost half a mile, and it contains 14 spans, 2 abutments, and 13 piers. The longest span, actually 2 of them were spans 7 and 8, are the 2 ones over the center of the river at 319 feet each. As I mentioned, 2 lanes in each direction. Each travelway or each barrow of the bridge is almost 32 foot in width, providing a total width of the bridge of 69.6 feet. And as I just mentioned, it's a 2 girder structure that supports the entire superstructure, 2 main girders. So the purpose and need of this project is really to address structural deficiencies of the Putnam Bridge to ensure safe travel for all facility users and to maintain a state of good repair. And in doing that, we will be repairing and replacing any deficient structural members, ensuring that the bridge continues to load rate appropriately for all legal, permit, and emergency vehicles, improving the condition rating of all structural elements to satisfactory, a 6 or better, and doing all of this while minimizing disruption to travel on State Route 3. Now, here are some pictures of some typical conditions on the bridge. You know, on the first interior stringers of the bridge, there seems to be some seepage through the deck that's starting to provide some corrosion and section loss on that stringer. So we will be addressing that through resealing the deck with a new membrane and also repairing and painting any of these section losses. If you've noticed, if you passed by the bridge recently, there's been some paint system failure on the bridge. We'll be addressing that with some sort of painting. We'll also be repairing the reinforced concrete deck on there, which means we'll be stripping all the asphalt off and either doing partial depth or full depth repairs of the concrete deck. Well, while we have the asphalt off the bridge, we'll be repairing those big modular joints at the ends of the main span. Those are the 2 joints, one on each side, that you kind of feel a little bump as you drive over, and also just taking care of any typical corrosion. This happens to be at a scupper penetration through the deck. So the goals of the rehabilitation work are really twofold. One is to get the load ratings up for all legal permit emergency vehicles. We're looking for load rating factors of 1.2 or better, and to extend the service life of the bridge for another 20 to 25 years. And in doing that, we will be doing the rehabilitation work, which is really comprised of strengthening repairs to the steel girders. Basically, the main girders, those 2 main girders of the bridge, is where all those repairs will be focused. Patching and repair of the deck slab, placing a new waterproofing membrane on top of the deck slab. replacing all the expansion joints in the bridge, including those main span expansion joints, and then repairs to get all other bridge components up to a condition rating of satisfactory, a 6 or higher. So here's a overview of the Putnam Bridge. This is the main span unit, which consists of 4 spans over the river. This is the northern fascia where we're looking south along the river. So this is a plan and elevation of the bridge. In blue in the center of the page, you'll see the limits of the Connecticut River under the bridge. The orange represent the bridge structure itself. The approach roadway is in gray on each side. And in magenta is the new trail that's being constructed on the southern fascia of the bridge, or to use the walkway in the southern fascia of the bridge as part of that trail. There is a little splinter off trail on the Glastonbury side that travels under the bridge as well, to some additional trails on that large floodplain on the Glastonbury side. On the elevation views, you can see the navigation channel called out under span number 7. And just to call your attention, when we talk about approach spans and main spans, the main span unit consists of the 4 main spans over the Connecticut River, which are, these 4 spans in the center that you see right here. These are the ones that have those haunch girders that you saw in the previous picture. And it's almost a separate bridge in and of itself from the approach spans. The approach spans are the ones that travel over the riverbanks on the side of the bridge and provide the approach up to the main span structure. So just to reiterate what we anticipate as our scope of work, being a little more particular, we intend to install girder bracing and cover plate extensions on the main girders to improve the load ratings. We'll be doing bridge painting, the scope of which has yet to be decided whether it's focused or painting the entire bridge. We'll be stripping the asphalt off the bridge, repairing the existing deck slab with something we call a strip, patch, membrane, and overlay type of project, SPMO for short. We'll be replacing all the expansion joints, including those big modular joints at the end of the main span. We'll be doing miscellaneous repairs to the steel stringers and existing abutments and piers, and that's to get the condition rating up to a 6 or better on all the bridge elements. And we'll be having to do this with MPT with 1 lane maintained in each direction when we're doing repairs on top of the bridge on the deck. So specifically, these are the repair locations at the approach spans. Now, what you see in the center of your screen is 1 typical approach span. There's 5 of these approach spans on the Wethersfield side and 5 on the Glastonbury side. So these would be typical repairs for all the approach spans. The green circles represent some top flange bracing for those 2 main girders, and then we'll also be doing some top flange cover plate extensions. Those are the magenta rectangles, and I'll show you some details of those. So again, here are some typical sections of the bridge. The upper typical section is just kind of a section showing the main girders, and you can kind of see the stringers. Now, the stringers are connected to the floor beams, which is shown in the section below. And then the floor beams at a distance of every 30 feet are connected to the main girders. It's almost like a steel grillage that supports the, of steel beams that supports this reinforced concrete deck slab. So as part of this bracing, these are essentially what we call shear blocks, which will brace the top flange of those big main girders to prevent any movement of that top flange. Right now, we want to raise the allowable stresses we can get in the top flange to raise the load rating, and this bracing provides the reason to be able to raise those stresses. And then this is your typical cover plate extensions. The majority of these plates are actually fill plates because we're dealing with riveted construction on this girder, and this is just to kind of incorporate the rivet heads into the construction. That top flange plate essentially is acting as the cover plate extension. And then for the main span, we'll have similar strengthening. As you can see, we have the green circles, which represent top flange bracing. we have blue triangles, which represent bottom flange bracing. This bracing is a little more complex, and we'll have a detail of that. And then we have a couple of locations where we retrofit what we call a longitudinal bottom stiffener. That's a pretty straightforward repair. So again, similar to the approach bands, these are called shear blocks. They basically keep the top flange of the girder in place, prevent it from doing any lateral movement. Can still move up and down as it needs to deflect under load. This is bottom flange bracing, and what we're doing on here is essentially bracing the two bottom flanges of the main girder with what is essentially a truss, a three-dimensional truss. And the reason why we need this is because we're bracing the girders off of each other. In case both girders decide to move, or the bottom flange decides to deflect sideways, this truss will keep it in place. There are 8 locations on this bridge where this truss is required. And then this is the longitudinal stiffener that we're placing on the lower portion of the web on the main girder in some select locations. It's a pretty straightforward repair. So anticipated impacts to this project, the biggest one is going to be the traffic and, interfering with the normal traffic flow in off-peak hours. When we're doing top of deck repairs, we'll be probably having to close one lane in each direction. If any longer lane closures durations are required, it may involve a weekend closure, which will involve a detour, and that detour would be over the Charter Oak Bridge. And at this point, we're not expecting any long-term closures or detours of any portions of the bridge. The wetland and watercourse impact will be minimal. There'll be no permanent impacts to the wetlands, but there'll be some temporary impacts because we'll have to construct some access roads just to get access to some of these piers that are located in some wetland areas. When I say wetlands, these are kind of river overbank areas. They're not actually like wet or swampy areas, but it's just poorly drained soil, which has been flagged as wetland type soil. We'll be restoring those wetlands fully when the project is complete. And as far as the Putnam Bridge Trail, which is slated to open sometime this spring, there will be minimum interruptions to the trail, as it will be pretty much outside what we will be constructing. We're hoping there will be virtually no interruptions to the trail traffic at all. There is that branch trail that travels under the bridge on the Glastonbury side that may be periodically interrupted, as in order to get access to some of the piers closer to the river, we have to cross that trail. And this is just a depiction of what the detour might be via the Charter Oak Bridge if it is required. And this is just detouring the southbound traffic, or I should say detouring the northbound traffic, and what that detour might look like. And I'll turn it back over to you, Tracy.
All right, thank you, Ron. So based on the current project schedule, assuming that we get all permits approved in time, construction's anticipated to start in spring 2026, and it's anticipated to be completed in December 2027. So 2 construction seasons to perform all of this work. The current anticipated construction cost is $31.36 million. But at this time, we are also evaluating fully painting this bridge, and whether or not that is a cost-effective solution at this point. If we did that, the cost would be more like $65.3 million. The construction cost is covered with 80% federal funds and 20% state funds. Next slide, please. So before we start the Q&A session, we'd like to thank you all for taking the time to attend tonight's meeting. We really appreciate any comments or questions. It helps us make the project better, successful. Because that's ultimately what we want to do. We want to minimize the impact to commuters through here. And then, of course, make sure that the bridge remains in good shape, in service, and safe for many years to come. So we hope you've found this presentation informative, and at this point, we will open it up to questions. Again, this is a reminder, you can either email us now. We are checking the project email. You can call us by phone. We're checking the voicemail, or you're welcome to add your questions in the Zoom Q&A box. Next slide. Just as a reminder to everyone, how to find that Q&A button on Zoom and open the Q&A box. Let's see. I will read the very first question that we got. Hi there. I may need to log off before the end of this. Will a recording be made available? And we answered it in the chat, but just for everyone on the call, yes, a recording will be available. You'll be able to view this entire presentation on YouTube for a long time. I think there are going to be records of this. So next question. Let's see. Will this project impact the nearly completed Putnam Bridge Trail? I'll kick that off. I think, Ron, you answered it.
Yeah, I can answer. And again, we're expecting minimal impacts with this project. That branch trail that travels underneath the bridge may be impacted when they're repairing some of the substructure units on the Glastonbury side. But other than that, we don't foresee this really impacting the trail across the bridge at this point in time at all.
Thank you, Ron.
Next question. Why does the painting of the full bridge cost so much? Right now, again, this bridge being built in 1959, there was lead-based paint used on the bridge. So in order to, when we paint the bridge, we need to what we call near white blast cleaning, where we will blast clean all that paint off the bridge and then put a 3-coat paint system on it. Now, all that paint that's getting blasted off is lead painted. So we need a full containment system on the bridge with negative pressure to make sure that none of that escapes outside of that containment system and is disposed of properly. In a nutshell, that's what drives most of the cost of that painting. And Tracy, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
No, I think you covered it. So,
and now, what are off-peak hours? Will they be working on weekends? So generally, off-peak hours are considered non-rush hour hours. I would, and I don't have the limitations of operations off the top of my head, but I would expect off-peak hours be anywhere from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on a weekday, and then between 6 p.m. and then maybe 6 a.m. in the morning on a weekday. And the weekends may be considered off-peak periods as well. And, yes, they probably would be working on it on the weekend, unless there, of course, it's a holiday weekend, or we know there's some big event going on where people will be using this bridge to access that event. Okay. When was the last time the bridge was refurbished? Well, there was, in the mid 2010s, there was a large project to do some deck patching on this bridge. And also they added the sidewalk on the southern fascia of it. And they added the modern style outside parapets on the side of the bridge. This project is to kind of address some additional deterioration that's happened since then, and also just to kind of replace some of the joints. And, it's 65 years old. Honestly, it's in pretty good shape for being 65 years old, but to keep it in a good state of repair, to keep everything operating normally, it needs to be rehabilitated every so often.
Yep. And just to add to that, with the availability of the federal infrastructure bill funds, that's the federal funds that we're using for this project. We're able to address these bridge elements before they go into a poor condition. So, it's just a good chance, as Ron mentioned, there's evidence of leakage through the deck that's causing the stringers to deteriorate further. So we have the opportunity, the funds now, to patch the deteriorated deck, put a new waterproofing membrane and a new overlay to ensure that, that keeps water out and protects the steel elements for a few more decades.
Right. Please consider adding a separation fence along the top of the parapet wall in between the travel lanes on the bridge and the new trail. Such fencing is needed to protect drivers and trail users. Thank you, Kevin Sullivan, Bike Walk, Wethersfield. I'll defer to you, Tracy.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Thank you, Kevin, for your comment. I remember your previous emails, and we are looking at installing some sort of fencing between the travelway and the pedestrian walkway, and that would be installed under this project. So,
is federal funding from the recent bipartisan infrastructure law that the Democrats passed? And I believe that answer to that, Tracy, is yes.
Yep. Yes, it's the infrastructure bill that was just passed. Was it 2021 or so?
Yeah. Next question, can they raise the barrier between the road and the users of the trail? That one, I think, is a little more complicated. We could put a fence on top of it. The barrier heights are pretty much dictated by AASHTO, which is the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. It's, the shape of these parapets have been crash tested. It's I think it would be more applicable to add some type of a fencing barrier in between the trail and the roadway in lieu of adding on to the concrete parapet.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, in addition, if we build a taller concrete barrier, that just adds more weight on the bridge that we'd have to account for. So the fence is a little bit lighter and yeah, would provide the same protection.
Okay, what would cause the bridge to have to be closed? Would it be on both sides? What would cause the bridge to be closed and detoured, and I assume it might be just one barrel, but again, that has not been worked through yet. But if it was something where, for example, we did some type of a concrete overlay on the bridge where the contractor needed to get access to both lanes of the bridge in order to lay it so that it could set up correctly. I think it would be a rare instance that we would be closing a barrel of the bridge and detouring traffic. And again, those plans haven't been fully worked out. So I certainly am not saying that to plan on a closure, but it is on the table. And hopefully I answered that correctly. Is the lead paint a concern for the surrounding area? Has there been testing done?
So I can take that one. I mean, there is lead paint on the bridge now. And we've confirmed that it's there. I I think when we're removing the paint, it, we would contain it fully. Um, I suppose we haven't done any additional testing for any lead paint that's come off over the years. But when we are removing it, we would fully contain it so that and remove the lead paint, dispose of it properly, so that it wouldn't fall into the river during the painting process.
Okay. How will the contractors acquire access to complete the lower flange repairs? So we are planning to put a suspended platform hanging under the bridge, something very similar to the platform that was hung under the walkway to do repairs to the walkway. It'd be basically a cable-supported span that you would access from one side of the bridge or the other by walking out there. Very typical construction access type when you're working over rivers or regulated areas or areas with access that would be difficult from the ground. Okay, Charter Oak and Bissell Bridge paths both have a protective fence for pedestrians and cyclists. Why not this bridge? Can this be considered to be added as part of this project? Again, Tracy, I'll defer to you.
Yes, so we are looking at a protective fence that can be added. It's one of the considerations is just that when trucks, especially that are tall, they hit the barrier, they tip sort of, and they can hit that fence, and it causes damage and needs to be repaired more frequently. So we're trying to find an easier maintenance solution, but we certainly want to protect any pedestrians or bicyclists on the path as well. So we are definitely looking at a protective fence option.
Okay. Where will you stage all of your vehicles and equipment during construction? Please be sensitive to impact to the trail on the Wethersfield side and into the Wethersfield Meadows area. Thanks. Well, we're looking at staging areas basically under the bridge. On the Wethersfield side, pretty much the staging area that's being used on the bridge right now for that trail project, and something similar on the Glastonbury side under the first span of the bridge on the Glastonbury side. It could be used as a staging area there with access off of Route 3 southbound. And if you travel that way right now, you kind of see a kind of a dirt road kind of trailing off down the embankment behind some concrete barrier just before you get on the bridge. That would be the access road going down to under the bridge on the Glastonbury side, and there's likely to be a staging area there as well. Again, both of those staging areas would not encumber the existing trail or that proposed multipurpose trail that's to be opened this spring. The last major renovation involved closing the bridge on weekends with little or no weekday work. Is that likely this time? I will say this is highly unlikely in the fact that, again, it hasn't been fully developed, but there's no reason why the contractor for these types of repairs could not be out there on the off-peak hours on a weekday doing those repairs. He could take a full lane and he has a full roughly 16 feet width to work in to do the repairs for about 5 to 6 hours a day. So I think this project will probably run quite differently than the previous project. And does this project include renovations to the Justin A. Donino Memorial Bridge on the Wethersfield side? And Tracy, I'll defer to you.
Yes, so at this time, I believe that's the bridge that carries Route 3 over 91, just to the west. There are no plans to do any work on that bridge under this project. Um, if there is a reason why you think that we should be looking at that bridge further, please let us know, and we'll certainly take a look at it after this meeting and see if any work needs to be done.
Has there been any consideration for a noise barrier between travel lanes on the trail? Would work as good as any fence and would improve the experience dramatically for people and bicyclists. A close example of this is the new Tappan Zee Bridge. And I believe on the Tappan Zee Bridge, that is a clear barrier that is between that sidewalk and the bridge itself.
Yes.
Again, I'll speak, I don't want to speak for you, Tracy, but I believe this is in the early parts of consideration, and certainly something like that could be considered. Tracy, I'll defer to you.
Yes, yeah, we can take a look at a noise barrier as well between the travel lanes and the trail. In the past, we have had some experiences with that clear noise wall, and it tends to get kind of like fog. Maybe foggy is not the word, but it doesn't remain clear. It's difficult to keep clean, and it just kind of looks dirty after a little while. But we will certainly take a look at the options out there and see if, maybe there's a new product that we haven't used before that might work. Okay, this is great. Really appreciate all the questions and comments. We can just wait a couple more minutes, just in case anybody has any other questions you're just thinking of.
Or any follow-up questions.
Yep. And again, while this Q&A box is only available during this Zoom call, you can still email us at the project email address and also call, or you can contact me directly. You go on the Condat website, they have the major bridge page, and my email address is there too.
Question: are you planning or dealing with longer periods of high water on the Connecticut River and Keeney Cove? I think that is outside of the scope of this project. I'll defer to Tracy on that. Actually, myself as a user of that bridge twice a day, there was some recent flooding in Glastonbury, and I know that the trail was not inundated by those high periods of water, to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, to Ron's point, we're not looking to make any. I see. Thank you, Ellen, for the clarification. Yes, I mean we are considering that. Certainly looking at keeping the temporary access roads outside of the floodplain,
Right.
And we'll have a contingency plan if the water does get higher to remove that equipment or make sure it's anchored down so that it doesn't float down the river when we do have those higher water elevations.
Yeah, there'll be no storage of equipment or anything like that within the 100-year floodplain. So there shouldn't be any worry about that. And you know, accessing equipment down below onto that platform will probably be done in off-peak hours with, maybe a over the side hoist, lowering it down from the, bridge, one of the lanes on the bridge down to the platform below. And we're not intending to encumber that trail at all with any kind of construction equipment or trucks or anything like that. They will not access that trail. Access will be through either Great Meadow Road on the Wethersfield side or that one access road off of Route 3, just on the Glastonbury side.
Okay. Well, if no other questions at this time, again, we'd like to thank you all for taking time in your evening to join us and share all your comments and questions. We will be preparing a reported meeting that'll be posted to the project website. And we'll also make it available for posting on the town's websites as well. So you can find this discussion. And as mentioned earlier, you can also go on YouTube and be able to listen to this whole presentation and Q&A again if you'd like. So and thank you to Derek and Dan and Jonathan for joining us from the towns tonight. Hope everyone has a great evening. Thank you again.